Hello, I'm Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I combine my master's in English with my passion for the horror genre to talk about the books and the poetry that I read. Today is episode 1 of a new series that will be coming out every Thursday in the month of October. This is the introduction to the Spooky Poetry October series. So, after this quick intro, we'll be right back with the first poem that I'm going to highlight in this October poetry series. The first poem that I want to talk about is a poem by the wonderful Edgar Allan Poe. But no, it is not The Raven. Although The Raven is wonderful, I feel like most people know that poem. So I want to highlight a poem by Poe that you may not know. And this poem is titled Ulalume. I'm dividing my Poetry Thursdays into two sections. During the first section, I'm going to simply read the poem aloud. And then during the second section, I'm going to discuss and analyze the poem. So if you're here just to hear the poetry reading, you can stop after that. But if you want to get some analysis, then you can hang on till the end. To Ulalume, a ballad by Edgar Allan Poe. The skies, they were ashen and sober. The leaves, they were crisped and sere. The leaves, they were withering and sere. It was night in the lonesome October of my most immemorial year. It was hard by the dim lake of Ober, in the misty mid-region of Weir. It was down by the dank tarn of Ober, in the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. Here once, through an alley titanic, of cypress I roamed with my soul, of cypress with Psyche, my soul. These were days when my heart was volcanic, as the Soriac rivers that roll, as the lavas that restlessly roll their sulphurous current down Yannick in the ultimate climbs of the pole, the groan as they roll down Mount Yannick in the realms of the boreal pole. Our talk had been serious and sober, but our thoughts, they were palsied and sere. Our memories were treacherous and sere, for we knew not the month was October, and we marked not the night of the year. Ah, night of all nights in the year! We noted not the dim lake of Ober, though once we had journeyed down here. We remembered not the dank tarn of Ober, nor the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. And now, as the night was senescent, and star dials pointed to morn, as the star dials hinted of morn, at the end of our path a liquescent and nebulous lustre was born, out of which a miraculous crescent arose with a duplicate horn. Astarte's bediamonded crescent distinct with its duplicate horn. And I said, she is warmer than Diane. She rolls through an ether of sighs. She revels in a region of sighs. She has seen that the tears are not dry on these cheeks, where the worm never dies, and has come past the stars of the lion to point us the path to the skies, to the Lethean peace of the skies. Come up, in despite of the lion, to shine on us with her bright eyes. Come up through the lair of the lion, with love in her luminous eyes. But Psyche, uplifting her finger, said, sadly, this star I mistrust. Her pallor I strangely mistrust. Oh, hasten. Oh, let us not linger. Oh, fly, let us fly, for we must. In terror she spoke, letting sink her wings till they trailed in the dust. In agony sobbed, letting sink her plumes till they trailed in the dust, till they sorrowfully trailed in the dust. I replied, "This is nothing but dreaming. Let us on by this tremulous light. Let us bathe in this crystalline light. Its Sibylic splendor is beaming with hope and in beauty tonight. See, it flickers up the sky through the night. Ah, we safely must trust to its gleaming and be sure it will lead us aright. Safely may trust to a gleaming that cannot but guide us aright, since it flickers up to heaven through the night." Thus I pacified Psyche and kissed her, and tempted her out of her gloom, and conquered her scruples and gloom. And we passed to the end of the vista, but were stopped by the door of a tomb, by the door of a legended tomb. And I said, "What is written, sweet sister, on the door of this legended tomb?" She replied, "Ulalume, Ulalume. 'Tis the vault of thy lost Ulalume." Then my heart it grew ashen and sober, as the leaves that were crisped and sere, as the leaves that were withering and sere. And I cried, "It was surely October, on this very night of last year, that I journeyed down here, that I brought a dread burden down here, on this night of all nights in the year. Oh, what demon has tempted me here? Well, I now know this dim lake of Ober, this misty mid-region of Weir. Well, I know now this dank tarn of Ober, in the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. Said we, then, the two, then, "Ah, can it have been that the woodland ghouls, the pitiful, the merciful ghouls, to bar up our way and to ban it from the secret that lies in these wools, from the thing that lies hidden in these wools, had drawn up the specter of a planet from the limbo of lunary souls, this sinfully scintillant planet from the hell of the planetary souls." Ballads often convey strong emotions. So Ulalume, because it's Poe, right, is saturated with grief, melancholy, and a sense of the supernatural. So Poe creates this eerie and atmospheric mood, which is a key element of the impact of this poem. Ballads are known for their musical qualities, as they were often intended for oral delivery or singing, which, when you read poetry, it is best to read it aloud to pick up on all of the rhythm, the rhyme scheme, and again, just to enhance that emotional impact of the poem. So Ulalume features a very strong, almost hypnotic rhythm and a complex rhyme scheme, which makes it even more musical. Poe utilized something called anapestic trimeter and consistent end rhyme that gives the poem a very musical quality. Repetition is a common form that we see in ballads, and it is used to emphasize key themes, key phrases, something that the poet really wants the reader to be attuned to. So Ulalume employs not only a repetition of words, but also repetition of sounds. And that really, excuse me, adds to the haunting effect and is almost like an incantation. Many traditional ballads also incorporated supernatural or mysterious elements, which we certainly see in Ulalume. It is drenched in Gothic imagery, and references, of course, to spirits, tombs, and mythology and folklore, and a sense of being in a liminal space. You're kind of in between, right? So the first thing after all of that, that now moving from the idea of the ballad to the specifics of the poem itself. So this idea of a liminal space, okay? So that's when you're kind of between spaces where you're not quite in one place, you're not quite in the next, it's between. And that's a very important aspect of this poem, because he's talking about night in the lonesome October. And we gather by the end of the poem that it is not just any night in October, but it is October 31st. It's Halloween. And traditional folklore, going back to the roots of Halloween, which for the Celtics was Samhain, they believed that the veil that separated the world of the living from the world of the dead was at its very thinnest on Halloween, or on Samhain. So again, Poe is making reference to folkloric stories, and the belief that this narrator is able to connect to the world of the dead, where his wonderful, beloved, deceased Ulalume now resides. He's able to have this interaction with her. Another thing I want to talk about is how Poe believed in something called unity of effect. In his belief, you can read about in his philosophy of composition, his belief was that whenever you set out to write a story or a poem, you must have the end in mind, and that everything that you write is going to be mapping out that eventual end. So if we look at this, we know we're starting off, the skies, they were ashen and sober. So we already get this dark imagery and this idea that this is not going to be a very happy poem. And truly, Poe wrote a lot of melancholy poems and stories, but he did have happy and bright work too. So don't just, pigeonhole him here. But back to Ulalume, right? So we've got the idea again, ashen and sober. Ashen, we think of, burning, ashes, right? It's dark, something's dead. Then we have the leaves, they were crisped and sere. So sere means like dry or withering, especially when we're talking about vegetation. So now we know, okay, the leaves, they're crispy, they're withering. So death, right? Death is imminent. The leaves, they were withering and sere. So here he repeats, almost word for word, these two lines with a slight bit of difference. And this again is attuned to the elements of a ballad with repetition. And it's also Poe's way of emphasizing to us that this poem is about death. It was night in the lonesome October of my most immemorial year. Lonesome October, right? So October, we're already thinking then of Halloween. We're thinking of spooky season. We're thinking of death, because October, of course, is during the season of autumn, and autumn precedes winter, which is the season of death, right? So he's hitting on all these points at the beginning, giving the reader an idea of where we might be going. It was hard by the dim lake of Ober, in the misty mid region of Weir. It was down by the dank tarn of Ober, in the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. So I want to talk about something right here. It was down by the dank tarn. If you've read The Fall of the House of Usher, you know that the tarn near the Usher house plays a very important role. So again, you can make these connections between works of Poe's. Now, I'm not going to do this specifically with every stanza because it would take forever, right? But here's our reference to mythology. Here once through an alley titanic, of Cyprus I roamed with my soul, of Cyprus with Psyche, my soul. So the Psyche is the soul, and Psyche is from mythology. There is the story of Cupid and Psyche. Psyche was such a beautiful woman that men began to worship and fall in love with her and started ignoring Venus, the goddess of beauty and love. So Venus was upset. Venus sent her son Cupid down to earth to shoot Psyche with an arrow and make her fall in love with just any random dude. And when Cupid saw Psyche, he ended up falling in love with her. Um, I don't have time to tell the whole story, but Psyche is not supposed to look at Cupid. She doesn't know what he looks like. And she breaks the rule and has a candle lit one night to try to see what he looks like as he's sleeping there beside her. And some of the wax or tallow, depending on which version of the myth, falls onto him and wakes him up. And then she has to go through a whole series of tasks, nearly impossible tasks, in order to be granted permission from Venus to be with Cupid. It all works out well for them, okay? But this, of course, is not going to be the case in this poem, but it's important to know that Psyche, is from mythology, and Poe certainly uses a multitude of mythological and folkloric references in his work. So he's having this time with his soul, right? And now I want to go on down and talk about just quickly elements of alliteration and assonance and consonants, which alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words close together. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds, and consonants is the repetition of consonant sounds in beginning, middle, or end of words close together. So if we look here, we get serious and sober, right? Our talk had been serious and sober, but our thoughts, they were palsied and sere. So here we've got this word sere again. So notice the sounds, right, in these words close together. Our memories were treacherous and sere, for we knew not the month was October, and we marked not the night of the year. So they'd been talking, obviously, right, very seriously, but their thoughts were palsied, kind of frozen, right? Kind of dry, treacherous, right? They're going to be betrayed because we know from getting to the end of the poem that the speaker is going to end up at the tomb of his love that he's buried exactly 1 year ago. And he's being, betrayed by his brain because he can't remember, and he doesn't even realize where he's going. So now he starts to talk about how, we noted not the dim lake of Ober. We remembered not the dank tarn of Ober, nor, nor the ghoul haunted woodland of Weir. Notice here we have an example of assonance: ghoul, wood, right? Ghoul haunted woodland. And then we have some alliteration with woodland weir. Now I want to go down and talk about Astarte for just a minute. And I'm going to get my notes here just to make sure that I give Astarte proper, I give you information that's proper. So Astarte symbolizes a deceptive or alluring force that tempts the narrator to forget his grief. Astarte is also a goddess from mythology. So again, Poe is making reference, right, to his knowledge of myths. She is warmer than Diane. So Diane I'm thinking because they are kind of in this woodland region, Diana is the Roman goddess of the woods, goddess of the hunt. Her Greek counterpart would be Artemis. So I'm thinking he's making that reference to mythology in that sense. Now, something else I want to talk about here. She has seen that the tears are not dry on these cheeks, where the worm, excuse me, never dies. So Poe has a poem also titled "The Conqueror Worm." So I'm feeling that he is potentially again referencing other works of his in this idea of the worm never dies. You don't get peace, right? The person is dead and there's constant decay. And so I think about that in terms of connecting works by Poe. And then I want to talk to this, right? Has come past the stars of the lion to point us the path to the skies, to the Lethean peace of the skies. So the river of Lethe in Greek mythology is the river of forgetfulness when you go to the underworld. So here he's saying that she has come to point him to the river of Lethe to forget, right? To forget his grief, to give him peace, right? The peace of the skies. And I want to make a note also in connecting this to other works of Poe with love in her luminous eyes. So, in the fall of the House of Usher, Roderick sings this little song called The Haunted Palace, which can be read as a separate standalone poem by Poe. But in The Haunted Palace, it is a metaphor for not exactly just the decaying of a home or palace, but the decaying of a mind. And Poe talks about how at the beginning, when everything is glorious, that there are luminous eye like windows, right? The windows are lit up like luminous, beautiful eyes. Then when you get to the end of the haunted palace and the mind has been completely shattered, he makes reference to the red litten windows. So no longer are the eyes luminous, they are now red, right? So it just feels like he's in conversation with himself, with his other works. And then Psyche trying to give a warning to the narrator, right? Sadly, this star I mistrust. Her pallor I strangely mistrust. She's saying, I don't trust this. I don't trust this star. I don't trust where we're being led to. It's kind of a self preservation here, right? Attempting to keep the narrator from going to the place that's going to reawaken his grief. So again, trailing down, right? In terror she spoke, letting sink her wings till they trailed in the dust. In agony sobbed, letting sink her plumes till they trailed in the dust, till they sorrowfully trailed in the dust. This makes me think about, the dust of those who are dead, right? Underground in the dust. And also we think of, it may seem kind of frivolous, but ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And if we go back to the opening of Ulalume, the night was ashen, right? So we had the ashes, that foreboding sense of where we're going to end up. And we're getting very close now in the dust, right? And then the narrator still wants to keep going, right? This isn't just a dream. Let us go. Not only let us, keep traveling by this light, let us bathe in this crystalline light. So just going to get all immersed in it, just going to just fully let all of this wash over us. Its Sibylic splendor is beaming with hope and in beauty tonight. So Sibylic goes back to mythology also, and to Sibyl. A Sibyl was one who would give an oracle or a prophecy. You can read about a Sibyl, a famous Sibyl in the Aeneid, which is the story of Aeneas's journey after the Trojan War. It is a Sibyl who guides him down to the underworld to speak to his father. So here again, Poe is letting us know that he is familiar with his mythology, and he's also using it to great effect in this poem when we think about the Sibyl being that oracle or that prophecy of the future. But it seems this Sibyl is being a bit deceptive, right? Because this Sibyl is beaming with hope and beauty, which is in great contrast to what we know that this poem is going to be. But the narrator foolishly keeps following, right? Safely we can trust it. It cannot guide us anywhere but right. And then he pacifies Psyche, right? Thus I pacified Psyche and kissed her and tempted her out of her gloom and conquered her scruples and gloom. So he's able to overtake Psyche's wise counsel with his own heart, I believe. He's being led by his heart, led by his passion, and not really listening to any sort of reason, right? Now we have the big reveal, right? Notice in this line what is written, sweet sister. So much alliteration, consonants, and assonants. He is emphasizing what written, sweet sister, right? Just getting all of that repetitive sound in there to emphasize that we're about to find out what's written. We're about to find out what's going on. She replied, Ulalume, Ulalume, 'tis the vault of thy lost Ulalume. So a lot of repetition of the word or the name Ulalume. Notice how we hearken back here to that first stanza, right? That unity of effect where Poe knows at the beginning exactly where he's going in the end. My heart, it grew ashen and sober as the leaves that were crisped and sere. So at the beginning, it was just the night that was ashen and sober. Now the narrator's heart is ashen and sober as the leaves that were withering and sere. And I cried, it was surely October on this very night of last year that I journeyed down here, that I brought a dread burden down here. Again, look at that repetition of sounds. Brought, dread, burden, down, right? And we're going down. I journeyed down here, right? Down the descent into the underworld, so to speak, on this night of all nights in the year. So Halloween. Oh, what demon has tempted me here? And then he repeats again this dim lake of Ober, misty mid region of Weir. Notice again alliteration, misty mid, and assonance with the misty mid, right? Well, I know now this dank tarn of Ober in the ghoul haunted woodland of Weir. Said we, right? And he emphasizes we, said we, then the two, then can it have been that the woodlandish ghouls, the pitiful, the merciful ghouls, to bar up our way and to ban it from the secret that lies in these wolves? So here he's saying, could it possibly have been that all of these, haunting beings were trying to keep us away from this grief, trying to keep us from coming down to be reminded of the lost Ulalume? And then he talks about the limbo, right? The limbo of lunary souls. So again, liminal, right? In between, in limbo. And now he finishes this sinfully scintillant planet from the hell of the planetary souls. So I'm looking at my notes to see what else I might want to talk about without keeping it too long, because I know that this has been pretty long. One quick thing I do want to talk about, though, is the dark romanticism element. I went ahead and took off the screen share aspect to finish up talking about the poem. So, dark romanticism. Let's go back and talk about romanticism. So, romanticism is a movement that was sparked as a sort of reaction to the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. So, romantic poetry is poetry that speaks to the individual, emotions, to nature. Famous romantic poets are William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Percy Bysshe Shelley, husband to Mary Shelley, John Keats, Lord Byron. So when we think about romanticism, we're thinking about emotions, right? So there was an offshoot of romanticism, dark romanticism, and the Gothic is an offshoot of dark romanticism. But let me just briefly mention the dark romanticism elements in Ulalume. So it has an emphasis on intense emotions, particularly grief, sorrow, and the power of the unconscious, right? The return of the repressed, to put a little Freud or psychoanalytic theory in here, because we know clearly that the narrator has repressed that memory of burying Ulalume, and it resurfaces, right? It's the return of the repressed. We have an exploration of the darker aspects of human nature, and we have use of Gothic imagery throughout Ulalume, and this building sense of mystery and dread, because we talked about how at the beginning the sky is ashen and sober, the leaves are withering. We know that ultimately this poem is going to be a poem about death. So that is all I have for Ulalume. I would love for you to let me know what you think about this. Would you be interested in having an extension beyond October where I do Poetry Thursdays? Let me know. If you know of a spooky poem that's great for October, please share that down below. I would appreciate it if you would hit that like, subscribe, hit that bell, so we can keep on talking about books and poetry together. Thank you for watching. Bye.